All right, hi everybody. It's August 29th, 2012. And as Hurricane Isaac's coming up the Gulf of Mexico, we're sitting here in North Hollywood, California at 65 amps. And my name is Dan Boul. This is Miles Rose, and we're probably going to have another guy, Mike Franciscini, come in and talk to you guys, who's our head tech here at 65. We are experiencing technical difficulties today. So I will not be able to play guitar for you. I'm sorry. And I have the prototype here. Yes, Mr. Fonzarelli, all ready to go. And for some reason, my board does not want to talk to Ustream. And I've been here for an hour and a half beating my head on the wall saying every variety of every cuss word you've ever heard. And calling all the smart people that I know, and I can't get it to work. I've even got people texting me with help. But our good friends at PreSonus are down in New Orleans, and they're getting hammered by Hurricane Isaac. So I'm leaving them alone today. And we wish them well, of course. We hope everything turns out well. So you notice it looks a little funny in here. We've got the camera mounted up a little higher so we can fit more stuff on. I got a couple of new lights. I'm just trying to tweak, improve all the time. So what we're going to do today is, what do you mean, Andre Mac? Just today? What's just today? Now, Paul Ovenstad's asking, the head of the prototype looks small. Will you make the proto in a smaller package now? Nah, that's just a cabinet. We can put it in it. We had technical difficulties last week, Andre, and they carried over to this week. But I'm working on it, I swear. They just put it in a cabinet so I don't have an empty chassis sitting here. I don't even know if it's screwed in. I think it's just sitting there. So what we're going to do today is kind of just open the floor and talk about general amp questions. I'll go over the prototype here first. I think that's a great idea. And then I just thought, let's stray away from 65. Let's talk about whatever kind of amp questions, rig questions, guitar questions, sort of like the car guys on the radio, the two old farts that sit around and make jokes at everyone who calls in with a question.
Actually, I think between you and I, we have 100 years here.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely. I think my real world guitar experience would be 35 years, 36 years of real world guitar.
Oh, I was just looking at how long we've both been.
Oh, as far as how long we've been
walking the planet.
Yeah, we're over 100 years old together. But you've been head first into guitars for what, 40 odd years?
Since I was 8.
So that would make it
like
94 years.
Yeah.
54 years.
Or at least 75 years.
So then we're at 92 years between us. Wow.
And if we get Mike in here, that puts us over 200.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, so be thinking. Now, I posted a thing on Facebook I should look at also to make sure I kind of cover
what makes
a couple things. Hang on one sec. So I posted last night asking for topics on the show. And, oh, there it is. And I got even people messaging me here on Facebook.
An EF86 is a pentode. It's like a power tube. And an ECC83
more detail.
Is a dual triode. There's two sides to that tube. And it's almost like saying what makes... actually, EF86s don't necessarily chime. They're a very neutral tube. In fact, they were originally developed by Mullard to be used in phono preamps with a gain of about 400. So it's just how the tube is implemented. 6L6 as an example can be used in a B52 radio or a Fender Twin Reverb or a Soldano SLO 100. They're all, it's how the tube is implemented. So hopefully answered your EF86 chime versus an ECC83.
Sorry. Okay, now we got questions here. Let's. I got it tight.
Yes, you could use an EF86 as a little pentode if you ever wanted to build a little teeny amp and use two EF86s in a little push-pull, you know, like a little micro Marshall or something. You could do that, a little, you know. But there's better tubes to do that sort of thing with.
Hang on a second. Let's get back up. That's not what we want. That's not what we want. Where's my window? Fuck. I mean, what the hootie hey? Can you guys still see us? That's weird. That's very weird. Okay, apparently we've lost our video screen. All I have is the chat window.
So that's an old chat.
Check. Well, let's just not scroll down the bottom. You guys can see us? Okay. What the hell? Alright, give us a second here. I'm lost. Put it over here. There it is. Computers.
There it is.
Okay. Wow, questions coming in like crazy. Okay. Hey, Craig. Love the London Pro. All right, good deal, Craig. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. So let's talk about the prototype first. The prototype is sort of our next step in trying to go towards this, what do you call it?
Amplifier.
Amplifier. We're doing, do you guys like bourbon? Yes, I do. Quite a bit. Next step in amplifiers, where we are trying to develop circuits that work with high current and low voltage, which kind of gets to tube talk, which we can go into. Hi, Martin. You know, amplifiers traditionally have always been made with a higher voltage and lower current because they're less expensive to make that way. But tubes don't like voltage and they love current. So as the modern supply of tubes goes to trash, we thought we'd experiment and try a little bit lower voltage thing. But what most people miss when they're designing low voltage amps is they don't raise the current. And current and voltage have a reciprocal relationship. So to get similar performance characteristics out of a tube, if you lower the voltage, you have to raise the current available for it to work correctly. And we talked a lot about this last week, so I won't go into great detail. But so the key component here is that we had to, have guys help us with a new transformer, power transformer, because there's no off-the-shelf power transformers that do what we're trying to do. So, of course, we went to our good friends over at Mercury Magnetics. Hi, Patrick, Sergio, Paul Smith. I hope you're back sometime soon. And we just told them, hey, we want to run tubes at this voltage, and we're going to look for this much current, but we want to overbuild it a little bit. And they, of course, gave us fantastic transformers. So the first amp we did this with was the Producer. And the Producer was EL34, was the EL34, still is, that runs a little under 300 volts, but like most Marshall Plexis are running close to 500, in the neighborhood of 500. Some run well over 500, but the 69 Super Lead can run as high as 530.
Well, some of the Plexi era Marshalls, there's some above 600. 600, 620.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the guy that did the Marshall book,
Michael Doyle.
Michael Doyle. I think it was either him or Richie Fleegler. They found 3 of the iconic Plexi Marshalls and brought them all into a studio to do a study on them. And one of them had 630 plate volts, had to have a fan running on it the whole time they were playing with it.
Yeah.
And at the other end of the scale, they had one that was about 410, and they came to the conclusion that it wasn't necessarily the voltage that made the great sounding Marshall sound great. It was other factors. But typically,
my favorite Marshall's 390 volts.
Typically, higher current. Basically, if you have an amp with 500 plate volts and it's a EL34 amp, your bias might be 34 milliamps, and if you're at a different voltage, it might be at 45 milliamps if the voltage is lower. Without going down that path, the higher current is liked much more by the tubes. It sounds better, it's more reliable, the tubes last longer, the amp runs cooler, but that is expensive. If you look at the fans of 65 amps website, yesterday there was a post that I did kind of it started off as a joke, and it turned into
a bigger joke.
Turned into a bigger joke and a banter, but the initial picture was kind of fun because there's a 100-watt Marshall chassis, a JCM 2000, that Mike Francis-Cini had been working on, and it was on the burn-in rack after Mike did some work. And I looked at the transformers and I kind of chuckled to myself because it was a 100-watt amp. So I took a picture of it and I uploaded it to the 65 amps, fans of 65 amps Facebook page. And then I came to Dan because I was looking for a producer set of transformers. And the producer is a very high demand amplifier at the moment, so there aren't spare $400 transformer sets sitting around the shop. So I came to Dan, I said, hey, can you give me one of the prototypes? And Dan grabbed one of the prototype transformers from Mercury that is actually smaller. The stack is a bit smaller than the current transformers used in the producer.
Yeah, that was one of the first iterations, so we went bigger than that.
But I took this transformer and set it on top of the amplifier and took a picture so you could see both of the transformers together. And you could see the difference between, basically a $25 or $30 transformer set and one of the transformers that's out of a $400 set. And that's why it's not done today.
Yeah, it just gets really expensive. Hola, Charles. Our friend Charles in Puerto Rico logging in from Master Sonics, our dealer in Puerto Rico. So anyway, it just costs more money to do current, but tubes just aren't taking. There's some good tube questions here. I'll back up and get to, but so we did it on that. We did it with the EL34s, and the big surprise was you could still get the great EL34 sound. Just like you said, the voltage didn't seem to matter as long as you adjust the current. And so your power transformer has to be able to supply that current. So if your power transformer is underbuilt, if it was designed for a 500 volt kind of amp, it doesn't have a lot of current in it. So you can, max out that transformer, and there's going to be the odd person that says, oh, hey, transformers sound better when they're stressed out. That's an opinion that I don't really agree with, but it's an opinion. And hey, David Hayes, how are you, brother?
I think in output transformers, some people like them to saturate in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
But a power transformer, if basically you had an amp that was 600 volts, you need a certain amount of current at 600 volts. Let's say it's 3 amps. Well, at 300 volts, you need 6 amps. Cut the voltage in half, you need twice the current. And current takes iron and a bigger stack and bigger windings and bigger everything.
Yeah, it just costs more materials. Yeah. So So the surprise was the EL34s. They sounded great. We were running them at like 290, I think. But the big surprise was that there was a clean sound in EL34s that I didn't know existed, unless you listen to hi-fis, as you pointed out last week. But in EL34 amps, we were surprised to get this really rich sort of hi-fi clean sound out of it when those tubes are just bathing in rich AC. I mean, they're really happy. So they perform better. And then the distortion is more musical. You still sounds like great EL34 stuff, but it doesn't have that ratty fizzy stuff on top that you can sometimes get when you're pushing tubes really hard with a lot of voltage. So the natural next step was this. So like, well, okay, let's try it with 6L6s and see what happens. Now, for those of you that know me, have known me at all, I'm not a fan of 6L6 amps. I hear other people play them and they sound great. When I play them, they sound like absolute shit. So I always like the clean sound on a 6L6 amp, but I hate the distortion on it. I really don't like it. And there's been a couple of guys that have made a 6L6 amp that gets good distortion, but 99 out of 100 of them, they're just horrible. So the big surprise again was the opposite here. When we did this with 6L6s, the clean sound was better to me than the original type circuits, but then the distortion's fantastic. I mean, it's just rich. When we fired up this prototype, the preamp is pretty similar to the producer. I'd say it's 80% the same. And but the power section's totally different. The transformers are different, all that sort of thing. But I assumed when we did this that I was going to have to, really spend some time tweaking the dirty side on it, and it just sounds great. I don't think we've changed it a bit. And it works really well, but again, we're in the same situation where running tubes at high current, low voltage, you're not stressing them at all. Like, these tubes barely get hot. I mean, you can touch them, it's fine. I mean, it'll be hot. You'll kind of, you can hold it for a few seconds before you go, but not like, getting a second-degree burn like you get off of a Marshall. So it's really friendly. The tubes are happy. They're going to last forever at this rate. But, doing the math, at the way tubes are degrading right now, this voltage, I think, is going to be standard in 10 years. There's just no way people can keep designing amps that run at 450, 500 volts and use modern tubes.
It's kind of it makes you wonder who's going to crack first. Is it going to be the tube folks or the people that buy the tubes from the tube folks? Because if these tubes keep degrading at the rate that they've been degrading, where they won't run at any kind of
like, for example,
medium voltage.
Those Marshalls you were talking about, you couldn't put any modern tubes in those. I mean, back then it would stress out Mullers, but they'd work fine. You'd get a couple hundred hours out of them versus the 1,000 hours you would normally get at 450 volts. But now if we get an EL34 that runs for 200 hours, we do a dance. But if you put a modern tube in those real plexis, they're just going to pop.
Yeah,
they won't work at all.
I still think that maybe the amplifier manufacturers, because people like Fender and Marshall and Vox buy a lot of tubes from the folks like at Mike Matthews, Sawtech, New Sensor. And what's going to happen if the tubes can't hold up to 400 volts or 450 volts?
Yeah.
If they will only work at 250 or 300 volts, in order for those amplifiers to sound decent, these amp companies are going to have much more pricey transformer sets.
That's right.
I don't think they want to do that. I think they'd rather put the pressure. Because, I mean, as an example, a Fender, what's the most popular amp ever made? 600 a day are produced in Mexico. Fender Hot Rod Deluxe. That amp costs $74.21 to produce. I'm not talking the transformer set, I'm talking about the whole amp.
The whole amp, right.
The whole amp.
But those transformers are made out of old soup cans.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden you have to pay $30 or $40 for a transformer instead of $8,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to impact your business model. And I frankly think that people like Fender, Marshall, Box, and your very large amplifier companies could probably exercise a certain degree of influence on the tube manufacturers. Then again, it hasn't happened, so maybe I'm wrong.
You look at the situation now where, we know people inside the big companies, and the failure rate of tubes is astonishing when you're doing mass production like that. You're forced to use the little cheap tubes. And even then, they're wildly inconsistent and there's huge failure rates. And, guys like me scream at the tube manufacturers all the time. I talk to these people and I'm like, what the hell are you selling? I mean, if I go into a store and say I want a 15-ounce steak and you bring me out a hamburger that's broken into 3 pieces, I don't pay for it. And that's what we get. You look at the spec sheets, which are just a joke, from these companies. Oh, this tube will take this much voltage, and it's a joke. I mean, the Rocket 88 we tried to build, KT88, it's a spec sheet on the tube that the manufacturer gives you. Says it can take 800 volts on the plates and 700 volts on the screens. We ran it with 480 volts on the plates and 450 volts on the screen, and 75% of them blew up. That's what we're dealing with, so it's just a joke. But there's a couple of questions here that we should, before I just go on a ranting bitch session. So with the state of modern tube production, what is the outlook for 6L6 tubes? Are they in the same place as all the other tubes as far as availability? 6L6s are pretty available tubes. It's really the quality of them that's sort of disappointing.
There's more 6L6s out there than there are EL34s.
Yeah, I think that's arguably the most powerful power tube. Is the 6L6 because it has a lot of uses beyond guitar amplifiers. As far as big power tubes go, to be honest with you, I think 6L6s probably sound the best relative to their NOS counterparts. Like the quality of modern 6L6s is pretty acceptable compared to like the quality of modern EL34s or the quality of modern most tubes. KT66s, the modern ones are horrible. KT88s and KT77s, the modern tubes are just horrible. There's all kinds. So it's, but having said that, there's still a pale comparison to an old RCA or a Tungsol or a GE or a Sylvania. They don't have that. Even with this amp, we have a pair of RCA black plates here, and I have.
Nice meeting you too, Bill, yesterday.
Still have. Tubes like this around, which I'll show you because they're just beautiful. This is, I gotta hold it up to the camera here so you can see it. This is a late 50s Tungsol 5881. And, we have tubes like this around the shop, and no matter what we put in this amp of modern stuff, and it's always like, well, let's put some real tubes in here and see what happens. And man, I can't tell you how much it's just, oh, there it is. And that just doesn't exist anymore. And so, one of the things you guys have heard me talk about a lot is I want to get into doing this. So I think there's a genuine need for it. But that's all down the road.
Look, can I bring up something?
Yeah, go for it.
Many years ago, over a decade ago, Dan and I crossed paths. Dan's shop was down the street in a little building. And I brought my tube test gear in, and we kind of sat down and I started showing Dan some of the things about his tubes that he had in his stock. And we went through a bunch of dialogue and developed a friendship, but at one point Dan said, I'd be willing to pay $50 for a 12AX7 tube if I didn't have to test it, and if I knew I could just plug it into
It'd
an
be
amp
cheaper
and not worry about it.
$50 a piece would be cheaper for my business than buying all the tubes I buy now and
Throwing them away. And the time, I've watched people in the back here at the shop spend
a half a day.
at least a half a day, if not longer, putting tubes in and out and in and out of amplifiers. And the amp goes on the burn-in rack when everything's looking good, sits on there all night. Next morning it's looked at, stuff is drifted, changed, and the process restarts.
It's crazy.
But so Dan said, so you know all these tube guys, where can I go where I can pay $50, $75 for a 12AX7 that would last for 10 years and plug in? And I said,
it'd be cheaper.
Nowhere. And fortunately, that's where we are.
And then, the worst NOS tube is pretty much guaranteed to be better than stuff I can buy right now. But there's just a dwindling supply. And every time I buy NOS tubes now, it's so obviously a pull or a reject.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago when I was buying NOS tubes, I'd get Mullard ECC 83s wrapped in the paper and it looked like a new tube. Now when I buy them, people are using the phrase NOS sort of, I would say, fraudulently, because they're used tubes. Because for like a Mullard when it was released, I got the hiccup. Sorry. When a Mullard was sold to you, what we now call 100% was the guaranteed minimum. A lot of them came out at 115, 120, 125%, and then they would degrade over time down
to 110%.
Right, and so now people put them in tube testers that don't measure tubes realistically at all. They put low voltage on them and just measure the amount of current that flows through them. That's transconductance. It's just the initial measure. Does this tube work? Yes, it does.
Can I address David Hayes'
hang
question?
on 1 second though. And they sell them. This is Lawrence Larson. I can't talk to you now.
Lawrence.
So people put a thing on a tube tester and it says 100%, and so they sell it as NOS, and then you get the tube, and it's so obviously a used tube. Like the paint's kind of rubbed off of it, and there's corrosion on the pins, and so it's. I wouldn't say, the end times are nigh. It's not that, but it's just getting harder and harder to find good tubes. Even if you want for your personal amp, like my personal amps, I usually use NOS tubes. And I used to go on, the internet and buy Mullard ECC 83s 5 years ago all day long for $50. And totally worth it in my mind. Totally worth it. Because I didn't have to buy 6 whatever tubes at $15 a piece to have one that sounded okay. So, yeah, it's a good point. David...
I want to jump in here for David Hayes. Yeah. David, I don't know if you're joking or being funny, but when you're talking about the $74 Fender amp compared to your $1,500 something that it takes you to build, many of your designs are Fender inspired.
But you make better Fenders than Fender does.
Exactly, you make better Fenders. You are probably the best Fender guy on the planet. But trying to compare that amp to your amp is kind of like my car that's sitting out in the back lot here right now has 108 horsepower. It's a Scion XB that's 10 years old or so. It has 4 doors and 4 tires, and it's nowhere close to a BMW M5 that has 4 doors and 4 tires. It's definitely not apples to apples. And also that amp retails for I think $649 or something at Guitar Center for a Hot Rod Deluxe. And Fender uses the normal markup that's approximately 8. The magic number in this industry is 5 to 8, most things being around 8, meaning an amp that's supposed to be an amp that
well, that's for production amps.
Right, production amps.
Boutique amps we're happy to go to.
Yeah, if you have an amp that costs you $80 to build, that's going to be $640 as your projected retail price, and that's fair, and that's what's in the business. I look at the way Dan does things with aluminum chassis and mercury transformers and his red line amps, which he refers to those as his more affordable amps. And it's a joke because, to me, because I look at, okay, what's different in his budget amps? The cabinet doesn't have grills that are really expensive. The amp still uses all Sozo caps and carbon comp resistors that are all sussed out. They sit on the burn-in rack just as long. They don't have this little in the Redline cab where this indents in a little bit. Actually, I think even they do now.
They do now. Well, it's just the transformers.
Yeah, the transformers. And he went through absolute hell saying, okay, if I am not going to use mercury transformers in this more budget-conscious line of amps, I need to find transformers that'll sound like and do what I want. So what does he do? He runs out and he gets involved with all these transformer companies, finds the people that used to build like the great triads for Fender in the 50s or whatever, starts working a deal with them and saying, okay, but I need it to sound like this and be done like that. So in essence, he ends up with a transformer that's of extreme high quality, but it's machine wound instead of hand wound. So he saves a couple bucks there and a couple bucks on not having the vents, and drops the price by like $800, where your profit margin ends up being, which is already incredibly slim, it's even slimmer.
Well, it's if I did the 8 times model, most amps would retail for
$9,000.
$8,000 or $9,000. Yeah. I mean, the Redline stuff would retail for, $6,000. But it just doesn't work that way. Obviously, this is a bit of a labor of love.
So bottom line, David, is never compare your Fender amps to anybody else's Fender amps, ever.
There's some good questions here. Third Coast Guitar says, I see 10% or more failure rate on my tube stocking orders, womp womp. That's pretty damn good. Great. Well, but you're buying ones that are already pre-screened.
Even pre-screened.
Are you seeing failures like in the shop? Like, I put in the amp and it fails. We're talking about failures after, we burn them in. And, our amps get the equivalent of about 2 weeks of playing on them by the time we certify them as being checked. And the program that we run through, it's 25 minutes. And every 25 minutes is supposed to be the equivalent of about 4 hours of playing. And so that program runs nonstop for usually 2 days. And the failure rate's ridiculous. We're buying a pretty large bulk, but I'll take 10% any day. We see, depending on the tube model, for the Tungsol 12AX7 that's in our phase inverter, I'd say there's probably about a 10% failure rate. For EF86s, it's 50%. And for long plate 12AX7s, it's about 30%.
The old EI long smooth plates, I saw failure rates when I was over at GT. We would have 90% on out, and on most tubes it would be 60%.
See, that's the thing. I'm buying them from guys like that have already weeded out what they consider to be the bad tubes, and then I still break half of them. So the further you go up the chain, the higher the failure rate is. And if I understand correctly, at some of the factories, I can't say names because I'll be really giving up confidential information. But at a couple of the factories that I've talked to people there, for every tube they make, they got 5 or 6 that just went in the trash. I mean, they didn't turn on. They did their initial test and it didn't work. So every time you're buying a tube, retail, you're paying for about 10 tubes. When I buy them wholesale, I'm paying for about 7. And they're still that cheap. So it's not a big deal. But so there's a question here. Doesn't Electro Harmonics make their own tubes? They have the old reflector factory in Russia. So they're using Soviet machinery from the 50s and 60s.
Electro Harmonics, Sovtek, Svetlana, not Wing C, not Svetlana Electronic Devices, but Svetlana, Mullard, Genelex, Tungsol. These are all names that were purchased by Mike Matthews who owns Reflector, or New Sensor, who owns New Sensor. He rents space at the Reflector plant, which is in Moscow.
Oh, he doesn't own it?
He does not own that.
Oh, I thought he owned it.
I
thought that was that whole legal battle.
That might be that. Yeah, I don't
ago.
know how that legal battle turned out, but you have the Reflector plant, and then you also have in St. Petersburg, which is very far away from Russia, you have the actual Svetlana Electron Devices, which has nothing to do with New Sensor or Sovtech or Mike Matthews. But all these names that Mike Matthews owns, if you look at certain tubes like a Sovtech 12AX7 LPS, hold that tube if you have an old one, and then hold up one of the Mullard 12AX7 reissues. Hold those up and you'll see that they're either identical or some very slight part, like the shape of the getter was changed. It has a new silk screen.
Well, usually the ones that work really well, they put the higher brand name on.
Right.
And the ones that are average, they just straight to.
The 12AX7 EH Electro-Harmonics later on turned into the Tungsol reissue. If you look at a Tungsol 12AX7, it looks nothing at all like that too, as is the case with everything else. But I really don't care,
because they work.
What label is put on a tube or what he calls it. The 12AX7 Tungsol reissue is possibly the best current production 12AX7 that's out there for a general medium or shorter plate 12AX7. There are some good things out there. Just because you see a name that says Sovtech or New Sensor or Mullard, ignore whatever it says on the tube.
It's all the same company,
Yeah.
Well, I know, like for the Tungsol reissue, that's their 12AX7s that work really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, instead of charging a premium for ones that they've graded better, the ones that they've actually thoroughly tested and come out really nice, they call the Tungsol. But, replacing tubes and R amps are a nightmare. Oh, it's not a nightmare, Paul. What are you trying to replace? I'll help you. It's not that hard. Shouldn't be that difficult. Mercury does, this is a good question. Kid Gloves asks, can Mercury do machine wound low voltage transformers, or do they have to be hand wound? Mercury does not do any machine wound transformers. They don't have winding machines there. It is a handmade shop. They're the real deal. They're a legitimate transformer manufacturer that's what they do.
Then again, what's the voltage on a Ventura?
The voltage on a Ventura, it's not that high actually, 370.
Because the Ventura has a pretty large power transformer. You have some current capability there.
We dropped for the Ventura, we dropped the voltage from 440 to 370 and then up to current.
Yeah.
I think it's 360 actually, but
and that's a machine wound transformer in that amp.
Yeah, anybody can make it.
It's a matter of having decent quality wire components, bobbin, and way more metal. In the core. It's just bigger.
What are the advantages to machine wound versus hand wound? Well, there's a few advantages, and I think people have different opinions. My personal experience with it has been that with a machine wound transformer, you can't do very complex interleaving of the windings. This kind of makes sense. It's kind of a crude example, but on a primary, there's the first half and the second half. The first half is where the signal comes in, it gets transformed by the device, and it goes out the second half. The first half is called the primary, the second half is called the secondary. Where those two sides communicate and do their stuff is in the interleaving of the wires. So the way the winding is made, they touch each other. So with a machine wound transformer, you can only do 4 interleaves. It's just the nature of the machine. And so you get something that looks kind of like this. With a hand wound transformer, you got an operator cranking it, and then he can turn it, and it has a thing similar to a protractor or a compass on the side of it, and he turns it 22.5 degrees and does another winding, and then turns it 11.5 degrees and does another winding, and then flips it over. You can do very, very complex interleaving. So what you get is a transformer that's wound more like this. So there's much more contact between the primary and the secondary there. So this is very crude because I only have 10 fingers, but you can imagine that how much more data, how much more music, electricity is being conducted cleanly through a connection like this versus a connection like that.
That's where all the articulation and definition comes from, as opposed to a cheap transformer where it's all kind of smeared together. When you strum a chord, you kind of hear a G chord. On a cheaper transformer, you hear the G chord, and you can pick out all the individual strings. You can hear each string when you strum that chord on a nice transformer.
The individual character of the guitar, like I've got 3 different Les Pauls. They all sound really different. Through one of our amps, they sound really different, like amazingly different. Through sort of a standard variety, garden variety of amp, they don't sound that much different. So Third Coast Guitar said resolution, which is a good way to think of it. But that's a twofold thing, because for a lot of guys, having a hand-wound transformer is a problem for 2 reasons. One of which is it costs more money, which that makes the price of your amp go up a lot. The other reason is if you're building your circuit with cheap parts, or you don't know how to do lead dress correctly, and you're using a cheap chassis that doesn't ground well. You're using really cheap materials for your chassis and it doesn't ground well, and you're using Chinese resistors and Chinese capacitors and really cheap tube sockets and the whole thing, then a hand-wound transformer is going to illustrate that clearly. And because it's very, very bright, not bright as in treble, but bright as intelligent. And so it will relay all of the skimping that you're doing. And so putting in a nice transformer set is one thing, but it also means now you can't get away with anything. So if you go listen to a lot of amps that are garden variety stuff at the big retailers, 26 knobs and 32 switches, and they look kind of cool and they do a lot of stuff, play them side by side with a really nice amp, and it's going to sound like it's in the next room. When you sit and listen to it by yourself, you go, oh, that's not bad at all. But then you play it with something that has very nice transformer set and very nice components. It's as if you went from VHS to Blu-ray DVD. Like you still see the VHS tape and watch the movie and it's okay. You still enjoy the movie, but when you see it in detail, you go, oh my God, look at all this, So it makes a difference, and there's no way to get around it. There's no way to skimp it. And I know 10 guys that are only going, oh, you don't need that Mercury crap and blah 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 blah. And it's because if they put good transformers in their amps, that requires them to upgrade their entire amp. Let's see, what do we got here? There's some good questions. Who makes the Ventura transformer? That's our machine wound ones that are made by Magnetic Components out of Chicago. They're the guys that did a lot of transformers, as Miles was mentioning, for Fender, and they did all the Valco transformers in the 50s and 60s. And they were an OEM supplier for Fender and Ampeg and Supro and Valco and Gretsch and all that stuff. So it's the old factory that's still in Chicago. And we tried transformers from all over the place. I mean, I think we must have tried 7 or 8 companies. I had them wind samples for me, and these guys were by far the best. When did Fender go from hand wound to machine wound? I believe it was the post-CBS era.
Yeah, I would say even as soon as they went to Tolex.
Yeah, it might have been earlier. I think Blackfaces are all machine wound transformers.
Right, but yeah. And I think even the brown face and the blonde amps were machine wound.
But all the tweeds were hand wound. Yeah.
Well, when you look at the old winding the primary on top of the secondary, on the bobbin, when you don't have the end bells, most of that stuff was just, wound like that. I mean, literally.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them were hand wound, but they were pretty simple.
Yeah.
Triads were not complex transformers at all. You can reproduce those on a machine. But the stuff that we go for, like I'm a big fan of the British transformers. So for example, like in our original London, that 18-watt transformer has 11 interleaves. And it's a very complex transformer that's based on radio spares designs. And so we kind of combined, I had 3 old radio spares transformers, and we combined them all in that for our version of the 18-watt transformer.
If you look on a lot of Londons at the plates, you'll see them you can actually see the different layers of where even the plate material is shifted. A plate is cut this way, a plate is cut this way, a plate is cut this way.
Right.
And you look at the edge of the transformer and you can see the laminations are, the grain structure is oriented in a different relationship from plate to plate to plate.
Yeah, it's a complex transformer, and they sound good. Is there a design flaw inherent in half-power schemes that remove 2 power tubes from the circuit before it changes relationship? Yeah, the impedance changes dramatically.
Well, the impedance change
gets cut in half. I'm gonna get a copy. You talk on this. I'll be right back.
Yeah, when you come, I have to probably go because I have to pick up.
Okay.
Basically, I've written a lot of pieces on that, pulling half the power tubes to turn your 100-watt amp into a 50-watt amp. That whole thing ends up backfiring because the power supply in your amp, in your 100-watt amp, was designed to power a 100-watt amp, not a 50-watt amp. So what ends up happening is the amp actually takes longer to go into distortion up until you get to a very high level because the power supply is not sagging and nothing's happening. And the impedance changes. If you want a 50-watt amp, buy a 50-watt amp. If you want a 20-watt amp, buy a 20-watt amp. And if you want a 100-watt amp, buy a 100-watt amp. But the last thing you want to do is be pulling half of your output tubes in an attempt to drop your output power in half. In addition, when you go from a 50-watt amp to a 100-watt amp, you might have a different kind of clean headroom feeling, but the actual wattage, even though when you cut the wattage in half, you're only going to reduce things by 3 dB. And 3 dB is barely perceptible. So I strongly do not recommend pulling out half your output tubes. Yeah, there are some models that do have the model with the half power switch. Then again, that half power switch isn't just removing half of the output tubes and changing the output speaker, moving the 16 ohm load, for example, to 8 ohm load. The primary impedance issue, that's really kind of hard to explain in a broadcast like this, but what I'd like to do is say, go to the Jensen speaker website, pick a speaker, and look at a particular speaker, a 12-inch, a C12N as an example. Look at the specifications at the impedance curve. You'll see the nominal impedance of an 8 ohm speaker is only 8 ohms at one spot over its entire operating range. It'll go up to 60 ohms. It's all over the place, the curve like this. So you can plug a 16 ohm load into an 8 ohm transformer, and the amp will basically behave, for the most part, almost identically, and it won't be unsafe to do. Going the other way, having an 8 ohm load and plugging into your 4 ohm tap, that's not a good thing to do. The current increases through the transformer, and you can come up with failure scenario very quickly. But take a look at a speaker impedance curve, for example, on a Jensen website on one of their speakers, and you might that'll show you a lot.
There's something I want to mention here because I'm glad Paul Ovenstein just brought this up. Several 65 HP models have a half power switch, right? Yes, they do. But we are not removing those 2 tubes. All I'm doing is shutting off their screen grid. They're still in the circuit. So the impedance doesn't change. And as far as I know, I haven't seen anyone else do that, and that's the reason we did it, because I used to take my 100 watt Marshall and pull 2 tubes out, and it sounded pretty cool, but
I have to run
You
down,
gotta
but I
run.
just want to say real
Okay.
quick on the 3 dB thing. When you double the power, you only get 3 dB. 1 dB being the smallest amount of loudness change that the trained human ear can hear using test tones in an anechoic chamber. So basically 3 dB is nothing. So when you a 100 watt amp is not twice as loud as a 50 watt amp. If all other things are equal, the same speakers, the same front end, the same amplifier, the 50 watt Marshall versus 100 watt Marshall, the 50 watt amp will be 3 dB lower in output than the 100 watt amp, or the 100 watt amp will only be 3 dB louder. Now you could do the same thing by going from a 97 dB speaker to a 100 dB efficiency speaker. It'll be effectively like doubling the wattage of your amplifier. Anyway, I have to run and do some transportation stuff.
Okay, thanks, Miles.
I'll see you
Glad
later.
you're here. Miles helped me bailing out the show since I don't have connectivity, as it were, so to speak. So it's just going to be me now for a minute, and I can actually bring the camera closer to do that. I might go get Mike Franceschini here in a minute if you guys want. Camera does better close up, doesn't it? Where's MF? Yeah, I'll bring him in here. What time is it? It's 1. Oh my God, it's already 1 o'clock. Hey, Mike! You guys got to meet Mike. He's good. But, yeah, I know. So, Paul, you nailed it. We just interrupt the screen grids on those tubes. They're still in the circuit. And the impedance doesn't change on the transformer. So it's a simple way to do it. It just takes a little bit of switching. That's kind of different. Let's see here. Hang on one second. Make this look a little better. Good to know. Good to know. Well, anyway, so what else is on your guys' mind? We've already been here for an hour. It's amazing how we can do Tech Talk. And I appreciate that we got a bunch of amp builders here. Like Carp is here and David Hayes. And it's quite an honor to have you guys here. I appreciate it. And where are you, Third Coast Guitar? I know you've told me before, but I can't remember. I think I'm getting a shadow off my camera. Chicago. Oh, okay, cool. Are you a store? I was in the shop yesterday and I saw the cool stomp boxes. They'd come out if I could get around to doing it. It's been really tough. Oh, your service. Okay, that's right. Yeah, we got a couple of really cool pedals. I just want to finish. I'm just so overwhelmed with activity right now that I can't get to anything. I need help. Doug's Tubes. What about Doug's Tubes? Oh, where would be a good source for NS tubes that really aren't pulls? Yeah, Doug. Well, Doug will at least tell you if they're pulls. He's very honest about it. I think Mike Kropotkin at KCA NOS Tubes is a pretty straight up guy. I don't know Tube World, Paul, but could be. My favorite place in England is a place called Watford Valves. There's a guy named Derek that works there. He's really smart, helpful guy. Here's a good question, and I passed it up earlier, kid. I'm sorry. When you lower the master voltage on your older models, does it extend the tube life the same way the producer does? Yes, it does. It also allows the current to rise when you're dropping the voltage. So you get the benefit of doing that. It's not quite the same as doing it with a transformer, but it works really well. Yes, if you lower the voltage on your amps, they're going to last a long time, a very long time. Tubes hate voltage and love current. That's just sort of the deal, unfortunately. But can you describe what your pedal line does? More gain options. Well, they're really just boosters and distortion pedals, right now, and they're sort of our own flavor. I've got some old pedals that I really like, but I'm just trying to go for something that's natural, that's not really an effect. I mean, our original one, the Color Boost, is pretty much a range master, only we just made it a lot better. And then the ones we're doing now, I'm trying to get the most natural sound I can, and some of them are getting really close. Like, they're really good. Bill Studio says, I think the magic starts to happen at 3 and above, though. Yeah, the tubes need a certain amount of electricity to really work. Oh, this is a good question, Third Coast Guitar. I'll answer that in a second. Because, when you get really, really low, you're not putting much electricity into the speakers. So they start to, they don't react unless they get a certain amount of electricity in there. It's kind of hard to do both. So, Third Coast Guitar says, does your power scaling design compare to the London power scaling design? Not really. Ours is, I think, a lot more efficient. But the London power thing, without going into details, because I think that's kind of nice. I think it's kind of limited. It's also a very complex, big solution, which in my humble opinion is not real elegant. It's a lot of work. And it's really more about, the similarities are that we keep the filament supplies up, and then you're dropping the voltage, but ours also allows the current to rise, which the London power thing doesn't. So when you just start starving the tubes like that, it doesn't sound good. It's very complex. I don't think it's bad, but there's some good questions coming here. What are you throwing out, job offers? Carp, if I could hire you, I would. I need a capital injection. We're growing. We're as big as a boutique amp company's going to get, I think, and I'm just beating my head on the wall. I mean, like, I'm going to have to raise prices and everything because my wholesale prices have gone up about 60 to 65% across the board in the past few years. Is that a pizza? Oh my God, Eric Yard brought a pizza. Come on in, Eric.
Made good on my promise.
You freaking did it. I can't believe it. That's fantastic.
Hit every light, but I finally got here.
Yeah, good to see you. Come on in. Sit down and have some pizza. We'll get you on camera if you want, or would you rather not?
Let's remain somewhat anonymous.
Oh, okay. So, you guys know every week. This is fucking great. Sit down. You're off camera. I moved the camera.
Okay.
This is Eric Yar who's here, and he actually brought me a pizza. Holy cow! I can't believe it. Ooh, baby.
It's hard finding something that's not Domino's.
Well, this concludes our show for today. Wait a minute, here, you got to see this, man. This is good. Where'd you get this?
Santino's.
That's a good handmade looking pizza. Well, fellas, as much as I love you, we'll let it cool off for a few minutes and I'll dig in. Holy.
Actually, I got something I need to get out of the car.
What's that?
I gotta get something out of the car. I'll be back in a moment.
Oh, okay. Man, we'll sit down and eat this together.
Yeah.
Wow. Am I the luckiest guy in the world or what? Pepperoni with ground up sausage on top of it. Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. So you see him on every week is EJAHR, Eric Yar. He lives over here in Sherman Oaks, and we've just been making this joke on the show all the time about bring a pizza over. And he freaking did it. I can't believe that. That's really nice. Damn, that smells good, too. Okay, so says Dan. Yeah. Anyway, I've been holding off on raising prices as long as I can because I just hate to do it, but I'm gonna have to. Everything's probably gonna go up a few $100 because on some amps I'm technically losing money, but But yeah, Carp, I'd hire you in a second, buddy. It says, Dan, you have talked about or mentioned anything about dual voltage taps in a transformer at all. How does that work? You just insert the wire at a different point on the winding. You get different voltages. You got to do one wind for 120 volts, another wind for 220, another wind for 230, another wind for 240. So the multi-voltage ones are more complex. Where you run into a problem is a lot of guys like to bootleg the US amps over to Europe. The fusing's really different, and it can be really dangerous because the US amps are fused for the lower voltage here, which means there's more current going through it. And so we put big fuses in them. And if you do that in Europe, you can just destroy your amp and the fuse won't blow. So if you got a tube that's arcing, David, come on out, man. I'd hire you too in a minute, buddy. If you guys don't know David Hayes, check out Hayes Amplification. He builds Fenders. I mean, he builds Fenders. Like good ones. I played one here in the shop and I loved it. And I'm not a Fender guy. No offense to anybody. It's not been my thing. But you don't want me to start eating on camera, Lars. That's very generous of you. But let's see. La 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 la. Yeah, there's all kind. Oh no! Is that a different one?
This is why friends don't let friends play with studded belts.
Oh no! Is this one of Shanker's again?
No, one of Accept.
Accept? Oh, do you guys know the band Accept? Eric has these guitars. Let's see. Any opinion with regards to old vintage RS transformers and voltages? 210, 230, or 250 better? Well, the standard in Europe right now is 240. So if your transform, look at that. Oh my God, let's see this. Oh, heavy metal guys ruined. Look at this guitar.
78.
Wow, that feels good. I like that.
Yeah, saw the photo with you with the long hair and all.
Oh, you saw my 80s picture on Facebook with my hockey stick guitar. Had a Floyd Rose and EMGs in it and everything.
That's why I thought of you. 281s.
This is cool. It's a wraparound with 2 strings wrapped around and the other 4 strings going on tailpiece. I wonder why that is.
Experimentation.
So every time I play a heavy metal guitar, I want to do something like, here as I'm sitting in my tin can. Just makes me think of David Bowie, right? Far above the world, planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Yeah, it works, right? I love that. Oh, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing it. Check it out. This is from the band Accept.
It's on the album cover Breaker with the 2 white V's.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the.
You're talking out of my wheelhouse. I got to plead ignorant on this stuff.
It's the one with the star on the headstock.
Wow, that's cool.
All the way
What a
back.
nice neck. Yeah, man, those Bon Jovi comments are hilarious. I don't know what it was. I just got the right permanent or something.
I should show you the. I didn't bring the photo when I got the Shanker V. You should see my hair.
I had it happen one time. I was flying home to Missouri for the holidays. Thank you for bringing that. That's really cool. And I had sunglasses on and the big hair and was all dressed up like the poser that I was. And John Bon Jovi was so popular at that time. I think women lost their minds. So I was in the Denver airport and I'm like, eating a hot dog or something, walking down the thing. And I see these 4 little girls running and screaming and yelling, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they were running at me. until they got within about 20 feet, and then they went, "Oh, he's nobody."
A similar thing happened the first tour of Japan.
Yeah, I was just like, what? And I'm still like, "Oh, you mean me? I'm not nobody, you bitches."
We were in shock, and they just ran past, and then they were running towards us, and then ran past us. Once they realized.
No, they got close enough, you could see them all just go.
You can see that deflation.
Yeah, it's like, but they were just so excited that anyone could have possibly been John Bon Jovi. That guy was stupidly. Anyway, Master Sonic says, ask him if he knows Michael Wagoner.
I've met him on several occasions.
He says he's met him on several occasions.
And he was one of the original guitarists in Accept.
Yes. So let me get back to real questions here. Really, that's all right. This is just as interesting to me. Man, this pizza, I'm salivating like a dog right now.
Sorry.
Nah, thank you. We're going to eat it together and then burp and fart. Dude, close that lid. I can't, man. It's too good. It's like turning your back on Jennifer Aniston. You can't do it. So let's get back. Any opinion on regards old vintage RS transformers? Frank, if you are going to play that amp on those European taps, just pick one and give it that much voltage, because that's what it was designed around. I assume that's what your question was about. If you have a real Variac that can go up to 240, just pick any one you want and give it that much voltage, and then you'll hear what it was meant to be. It depends. Is there a certain amp you're talking about, or a certain transformer that you're... Yeah? No? Okay. Yeah, that's cool, Frank. Yeah, just give it what it expects. Voices on the prototype. American Clean. You asked me this earlier, didn't you? I'm sorry, Rock and Roll Willie. It's got 4 voices. The clean side is sort of straight, sterile, blackface clean. The really cold Fender sound. Then you can bump it up, and it's sort of like a Texas hot-rodded Fender thing. And then when you go to voice 3, it's a nice crunch rhythm. I wouldn't say it sounds Fender or it sounds Marshall. I think it just sounds like a 65. And then when you really kick it in, it's a nice, pretty modern high-gain sound. I wouldn't say a metal thing, but it's very high-gain. It's very singy, sustainy, reasonable. It's not out of control at all, but it's really high-gain. And makes very nice. 1963 JTM 45. Yeah, just run it, Frank, on what it's expecting. You should be fine. For some reason, the chat window wants to keep scrolling up. I'm not doing that.
Uh-oh.
So I have to keep going back down.
Just be careful with the caps.
Yeah, you can sit down. That's fine. I got the camera turned this way.
Well, no, just be careful with the caps on that amp.
Yeah, as long as the filter caps are in good shape. That's a good point. Projected price point. It should be right about where the producer is. I'm trying to keep it the same. Maybe less, but I'm trying to keep it the same. Can you mod other amp companies' amps to have your master voltage? I can, but I won't. I can do it on cathode biased amps, but that's not my business. And our thing is proprietary. We don't really do it. I mean, I got the idea from Dana Hall. If you guys hang out on builders forums, Dana and Richie Hall are 2 guys in West Virginia that are really, really smart guys. And Dana had the idea that I was turned on to by one of Sheryl Crow's techs, Andy Harrison. And then we took it further. It was to turn it into a production sort of thing. You really got to be careful that it's safe. And Jesus, look at that. But I guess technically I would. I'd do it for $1,000. Because you're taking me away from my business. And I'm not going to tell you how we do it. I spent a lot of time and money researching that and getting it right. So
That's why it's proprietary.
I got to recoup my costs somewhere. I'm a philanthropist at heart. Trust me. If I could feed the masses in a minute, I would. But right now, I got to feed my kids.
Super growth formula.
Super growth formula? What's that?
Makes lima beans huge. It's
Okay.
Saw it in a movie once.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, Eric's going to go start growing lima beans that are big as your head, and we'll feed the world. Until then, I have to charge money, and a lot of money, because the time that I'm spending doing your stuff, I'm not spending making products that I make money on. So there's a twofold cost here. My time is expensive, and then you also have to figure out, this shop costs roughly $150 an hour just to keep going. So, and it's about a 4-hour surgery. So, there's $600 just to keep the shop going, and then there's my fee on top of that. So, yeah, I say $1,000. Oh yeah, Andre, we're going to try to keep the price point on this new one in the same range as the producer. I'm trying to keep it exactly the same. So hopefully I can. So you can feed my amp. Okay, I'll feed your amp. Yeah, no, kid gloves, that's an easy question. You kind of threw me some red meat there. That's too easy. Well, guys, this pizza is calling my name. I'm salivating so hard I can't even speak in complete sentences. I'm sitting.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I'm going to give you a big hug.
I'm sweaty.
Yeah, maybe later. But any other quick questions you guys wanted to get to really quick before I sign off? I know there's a lag here, so I'll hang out for a minute. But otherwise, I'm going to call last call. Last call. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, kind of thing. Great show, great shorts. Oh, you got to see my legs. And just for fun, go to my Facebook page, and one of my old bandmates posted a picture of a band I played with in my hometown in between finishing Musicians Institute and then moving to Atlanta. And they had just lost their guitar player, and they were really good friends of mine, so I played with them for about 4 months and had the best time. Those are dear guys I grew up with. John Woods is the guy that posted it. John, you need to come out and visit. John's a great bass player. Now he just catches the biggest fish in Missouri. But
there's a lot of fishing out here.
That's what I told him. We got Castaic, we got Casitas, we got Kachuma.
You got salt, you got fresh.
That's right.
And you got stream.
But he's a bass guy. We're all rednecks from the middle of the country. And got the best bass lake in the country is Castaic. It's the best one statistically.
We got 4 catfish at home you can catch.
Yeah, right. Oh, Ventura is made right there. So, yeah, all of our amps are made here. We don't outsource anything. Lars Steinshead, thank you for joining from Norway. I know it's late there. Go to bed, sleep well. I'm going to dig into this pizza. Oh, you guys are enjoying the picture now. Yeah, the body wave permanent, man. It was the downfall of all of us. And the only reason I did it is because as soon as I got it, women went, "Oh, look at your hair. You look like John Bon Jovi. What's your phone number?"
Frosted tips, man.
I didn't do the dye. I didn't do the frosted tips. I just got the body wave, at the mall. $50, going for an hour.
Frosted tips, I even went with the hot pink.
Hot pink? Yeah, I didn't do that. I had the leather pants, and I think in that picture I'm wearing leather pants. I have a tank top on, cowboy boots, and a guitar that looks like a hockey stick.
Wow. Yeah, the full gear.
I was full on, man. I wasn't spandex and eyeshadow, though, which that was sort of the other part of the music scene then. We were more the raunch and roll guys. When the show comes back, the pizza will be gone. Pizza's going to be gone real damn fast, I'm telling you right now. Way too much info. Oh, carp, man. I thought we were... Go look at the picture on my Facebook page. You guys will die laughing. There's one picture, and I swear to God, I was sneezing in the picture. They took this picture of me, and I'm like going, oh, and because they thought it looked really rock and roll, and I swear I was sneezing. So look at that picture and go, oh yeah, he's sneezing. He's getting ready to blow one out.
You're just sustaining that perfect note.
And I remember, this is before digital cameras, and these guys took a lot of pictures. I mean, they had like 3 or 4 cameras on them, local news reporters, and they shot maybe 200 pictures, which in the days of film was quite an investment.
And they picked that one.
And they picked the one where I'm freaking sneezing, It was bad. It looks like I'm into my playing there, but seriously, if you've ever seen, shut up. If you've ever seen me sneeze, that's it. But anyway, thank you guys so much. It's always nice to spend time with you, and I appreciate you tolerating our technical difficulties today. And we're going to get it fixed. And if you're one of the PreSonus guys down in New Orleans, we're thinking about you. Don't worry about my board. That'll be fine. We want you guys to make it through this hurricane, okay? With those new lights, we don't look a day over 90. Hey, what is it? I don't think it's right yet, but I need to cool them off a little bit.
It's a bit warm in here.
I have dimmers coming. Yeah, I see my AC vents right here. Everybody else is warm. But yeah, I got dimmers coming, and so I can balance it out a little more. But with this little camera, you can't put too much. Dan Joby. Everyone's calling me. There's like 5 guys here now.
As long as they don't call you Dan Halen.
You give love a bad name, but not pizza, baby. I'm going for this shit. Anyway. So, let's see. Last one. Great show. Thank you, David Hayes. We'll see you guys soon. Master Sonics. Hasta la vista, which won't be that long, actually. Hopefully I'll see you pretty soon. And I'll tell Miles goodbye. And we'll see you guys next week. And I'll try to do the prototype. I swear. So have a good week, fellas. Contact me on Facebook or on email if you have any questions at all. I'm always here to help. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.